Over the last decade, high-profile cyber attacks have steadily increased among national governments, such as the United States, China, Russia, Israel, and even North Korea. As cyber warfare becomes the battlefield of choice for developed nations, governments are able to launch direct attacks against each other in secrecy and without the risk of causing physical harm. But computing technology is advancing faster than international regulations and policies are prepared to deal with. As such, cyber weapons offer a new method for nations to wage war without entering into an actual military confrontation. This trend has resulted in new global threats as digital technology becomes increasingly integrated into all aspects of life. In this report, we will examine the effectiveness, allure, and dangers of cyber warfare. My name is Nathan, and welcome to Caspian Report. The rapid computerization of the world has dramatically changed the landscape of national security. Virtually all industries critical to sustaining modern societies now rely on computers, and this dependency will only increase as technology improves. Although the benefits of technological advances are countless, the increasing reliance on computers opens the possibility for malicious agents to disrupt or destroy vital data networks and services. As a result, national security organizations are now going beyond traditional air, land, and naval defenses and are pursuing sophisticated cybersecurity and cyber warfare strategies. Oftentimes, cyber attacks take advantage of what are known as zero-day vulnerabilities, which are software security flaws that have no public knowledge and therefore give the software developers 0 days to react. Leaks, vulnerabilities, and viruses are constantly evolving in a game of cat and mouse, with hackers attempting to break into software and software engineers scrambling to patch their security holes. In early 2017, a massive trove of such exploits, tools, and viruses from the CIA was released by the website WikiLeaks. The leak, referred to as Vault 7, contained over 7,000 pages of text and 900 files of confidential and highly sensitive information that belonged to the United States government. Vault 7 revealed that Washington was actively developing cyber weapons with widespread capabilities. One researcher at Berkeley described the contents of the leak as God mode tools that, used sparingly, were an incredible asset to US intelligence. Investment into cyber warfare has become more prevalent over the past decade, with Vault 7 being only the latest in multiple instances of large-scale use and development of cyber weapons. The history of cyber warfare is brief, but a series of events in 2010 marked a major turning point that uncovered the grave dangers that cyber weapons posed to the global community. It began when a security company in Belarus had been contacted by one of their Iranian clients about strange computer malfunctions. After some investigation, the Belarusian engineers discovered that the problems were caused by malware using stolen electronic certificates and exploiting a zero-day vulnerability in the Windows operating system in use by their Iranian counterparts. This led the engineers to report their findings to the cybersecurity community. The investigation that followed shocked the cybersecurity industry and unraveled a cyber weapon that was orders of magnitude more complex and sophisticated than anything that had been seen before. The malware, nicknamed Stuxnet, is regarded as the first, biggest, and most sophisticated example of states using a cyber weapon for offensive purposes, according to David Sanger of the New York Times. The conception of Stuxnet originates from the tense diplomatic crisis between the United States, Israel, and Iran concerning the latter's development of nuclear weapons. The nuclear program was seen as an existential threat to the Israelis, who were putting immense pressure on their allies in Washington to intervene. Given the recent travesty of the Iraq War, the Bush administration viewed any military conflict with Iran as a non-starter. However, fears that Israel could pursue a preemptive strike and drag the United States into yet another war in the Middle East meant that something had to be done. The result was a joint Israeli and American intelligence force that set out to destroy Iran's nuclear program from within using a cyber weapon codenamed Operation Olympic Games, which later became what we know as Stuxnet. Utilizing multiple zero-day exploits, Stuxnet was specifically designed to infiltrate the Natanz nuclear facility in Iran by silently spreading through devices operated by those working with the Iranian government. Once the malware found itself inhabiting a control system for the uranium centrifuges, it autonomously increased the speeds past their safe limits while reporting normal behavior to the Iranian engineers and preventing any attempts to shut them down. Eventually, the centrifuges began to self-destruct. At first, the Iranian engineers were clueless to the real cause of the damages, and for a time Stuxnet had the double effect of both destroying the centrifuges and spreading confusion through the Iranian government. However, in their haste to infiltrate the Natanz facility, the Israelis modified Stuxnet to become more aggressive than Washington had ever intended and caused it to spread rapidly around the globe. It was only a matter of time before the weapon was discovered and exposed to the public. Stuxnet was targeted to autonomously attack a specific type of computer that was commonly used in industrial control systems across the world. This shocked even the US Department of Homeland Security, which, having no prior knowledge of the malware, viewed its own government's weapon as a grave threat to national security. In essence, Pandora's box had been opened, releasing a new breed of weaponry that threatened the very foundations of society. The development of cyber weapons with such widespread destructive potential poses nearly as great a threat to humanity as biological warfare or nuclear weapons. However, instead of a global policy of prevention similarly applied to other weapons of mass destruction, the use of cyber weapons by governments has only increased since the discovery of Stuxnet. Not long after the Natanz attack, the Iranians struck back at the United States by taking down online banking services for dozens of the largest US financial institutions, costing them tens of millions of dollars, in addition to infiltrating the control systems of a small dam in New York. In March of 2013, South Korean banks and news broadcasters were hit by a large cyber attack which was suspected to be launched by the North Korean government. The attack paralyzed various banking services and shut down websites, temporarily crippling parts of the South Korean economy. A year later, another attack, also suspected to have been launched by Pyongyang, hit Sony Pictures in response to their release of the film The Interview, which leaked or destroyed large amounts of sensitive data. In another example, in late 2015, the Ukrainian power grid was temporarily taken down through the use of a cyber weapon. The attack, which came from Russia and may have been sponsored by their central government, disabled up to 95% of Ukraine's total power supply for multiple hours and left some computer systems down for many months afterwards. The attackers even went as far as flooding the power station's phone lines with fake telephone calls to cripple their communications. The ability to target a country's infrastructure, economy, and industrial control systems makes developed nations at an extremely high risk of cyber attacks. Although the previous example of the dam attack in New York was mostly harmless, consider if the targets were instead the dams in the Netherlands, which protect the densest country in the European Union from flooding and are essential to the nation's very existence. Also consider if national communications and power grids were also taken down in the attack, as done so in Ukraine, and made a coordinated response to the flooding impossible. An attack of this magnitude is a real possibility and would be nothing short of a humanitarian catastrophe. Jens Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, recently outlined the alarming increase in the use of cyber weapons like these over the past few years and voiced deep concerns about the lack of defense against such weapons and overall unpreparedness to deal with them. According to Stoltenberg, cyber attacks against NATO had increased by 60% from 2015 to 2016, with last year averaging 500 attacks per month. In 2011, the US government declared that cyber attacks constituted an act of war that could constitute military retaliation, with some defense officials later claiming that they may even become an existential threat. To compound these concerns, it is always possible for cyber weapons to get into the wrong hands or be used by non-state actors and extremists. The Vault 7 leaks are a prime example of why powerful cyber weapons and zero-day exploits can be a danger to society just by existing. The leaked information and weapons could just as easily have been sent to a terrorist organization instead of the relatively benign WikiLeaks. These threats are only going to grow as cyber weapons become more sophisticated and essential economic and industrial systems become more computerized and connected. Yet despite this, national security organizations have continued to devote the majority of resources towards developing even more powerful cyber weapons instead of focusing on defending against existing threats or preventing the development of cyber weapons in the first place. This has led to an international cyber arms race, which in some ways mirrors the development of nuclear weapons during the Cold War. Although cyber weapons are much harder to detect and prevent, the international community will need to address the global threat of cyber weapons with dialogue and cooperation, as it did for nuclear arsenals with the creation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The United States and Russia continue to inspect each other's nuclear facilities through a mutual agreement under the New START Treaty, and is an example of the kind of framework that can be reached in an international effort to curtail the threat of cyber weapons. However, for the most part, cyber capabilities are shrouded in secrecy. The revelations of numerous CIA and NSA leaks show the extent to which national governments are hiding not only their cyber warfare capabilities, but also dangerous vulnerabilities and exploits of widely used software as well. Michael Hayden, a former director of the US National Security Agency and CIA, has described cyber warfare's origins in espionage and its hideously overclassified treatment as a major problem holding back public discussion of cyber threats. So far, nobody in either the American or Israeli administrations have gone on the record to claim responsibility for the Stuxnet attack, representing the general attitude towards cyber warfare, which is essentially to do whatever you can get away with and deny any involvement. The irony is that the most developed nations like the US secretly develop the most sophisticated cyber weapons while also being the most vulnerable to them. This alarming and unsustainable trend will need to be addressed publicly before it is too late. This was a Caspian Report by me, Nathan. I want to thank our great contributors on Patreon who continue to support this channel, and if you'd like to help us keep making quality content, head to patreon.com/CaspianReport to become a patron today. You can also follow me on my personal Twitter account, which is linked in the description below. As always, thank you all for watching, and see you next time.